Hello everyone, welcome back to Apollo Art Analysis. This episode we're going to be taking a look at a piece by the multidisciplinary artist known as Oknice Art. This episode we're going to be talking a little bit about the crocodiles of conflict, we're going to talk about the archaic symbols of chaos and order, and we're also going to talk about the immense importance of ancient Egypt. So let's jump right into it. So whenever you first see this work, you're met with, we're kind of set in this perspective of this small room here, and the room appears to be flooded, and we kind of have this descending region where it drops off there. We also have some lush foliage within the spatial composition as well. And so what you'll notice here is we are a little bit in a darker region here, and we have this single source of light coming from kind of that arch or that entryway there. So that's very important. It feels very calm, and we're in those darker regions with a single source of light coming out there. And so with this in mind, this is very important because we're positioned within that. It feels very isolated. We don't see too many people. See a very small crocodile. We'll talk about that in a second, but there's no people here, there's not too much going on, so it is quite a tranquil scene in its initial introduction. And so with that in mind, we also have two main colors within the work at hand, and that's really going to be that kind of bluish green mixed with that kind of sandstone yellow gold type of color there. And so those are our two foundations, and then you do see, of course, variants, whether it's the red variants and more so yellow, a little bit lighter green as well. So there are some variants there, but the main is going to be that blue green and that sandstone yellow gold. So very natural colors for sure, whether it's sandstone, whether it's of course the ocean or water, or whether it's the lush foliage of the green. We really get those natural tones within the work at hand. And so we're looking at a piece from ancient Egypt, and Egypt is just it's almost at a loss for words. There's so many different roots that really originate in ancient Egypt. So they lasted about 3,000 to 4,000 years, depending on where you place that marker at, before being eventually conquered by, I believe, Alexander the Great in the 300s or so, if I'm correct. But ancient Egypt just has an incredible foundation for so many future cultures, whether it's Greek, whether it's Roman, so many things really can root from that. Incredibly important. And one of the most iconic things of Egypt, of course, are their hieroglyphs. And hieroglyphs originally were only used in sacred sites, but eventually, they were much greater after that. So with this in mind, with that kind of inference, maybe we're looking at some type of temple or some type of divine scene. We may see a hypostyle hall there, so that could indicate some type of divinity or an increased status of prestige for the destination which we're standing in. It's hard to say for sure, but we do note those hieroglyphs all throughout the walls of the work at hand. And so with this in mind, like I said, there is just an incredible influence of ancient Egypt. They really are in many ways the root to the Greeks and the Romans. They loved the columns, they loved just so many things of the Egyptians, and so they took a lot of influence that. And then of course we know that ancient Egypt, and then of course Greece and Rome, all three of those are just incredible foundations for even more after that. So it's kind of ancient Egypt, such an archaic root, or an ancient root that's very important to remember. So with this in mind, just such a rich history, and there's so many different things that we can there's so many different things we could credit as well as kind of point back to the Egyptians. So one of those things is going to be the column, or at least the hall of columns, the hypostyle hall. So I brought some here. We're going to take a quick look at those. So what I want you guys to look at is that column far within the spatial composition. So I'm going to bring what I believe to be that column. So we have quick reference. And so this is the closest I could get of what I believe the column is I believe it's a papyrus column. And so it looks something similar to this, maybe around here. It's hard to say for sure. Of course, it is farther in the back region of the spatial composition, but we do see kind of that cup type of shape near the top. There's a little bit of motifs at the top as well, which is what I'm referencing there. So I believe this is the closest that we're getting to what looks to be that column in the back region of the spatial composition. So really wanted to reference that. And of course, there is no color on it. The scene is kind of decaying. But if you guys did want to reference that, this is what that color would have looked like. So very incredibly luxurious. Of course, the red and the green, they actually match that really well. So I just love that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the column there. Let me just move these out of the way real quick. And so whenever they made the column, or the hypostyle hall in general, they did it with something called a fluted column. And so the fluted is really a texture that you can see here. And what that is, it's trying to mimic reeds. So reeds, of course, in the Nile River, ancient Egypt, very, very important. The Nile, so many different things, really is kind of their axis mundi, if you will. But with this in mind, we see they actually took reeds, or at least tried to mimic that aesthetic there. So the column is made up of what appear to be not literal reeds, but they're trying to mimic that. So they're trying to mimic the natural world. And I want you guys to think about this really closely, of course. If they take reeds, of course, reeds are a sign of the natural world or the chaos of the natural world, of course, out in the wilderness. And if they take those and put them all together into a pillar, and then use that pillar to support the thing above it, that's really a testament to kind of the cultural order that they're able to establish. Of course, you see, they take the chaos of the natural world in the form of, say, the reeds, and then they put that together, of course, symbolically, not literally, to create the column. So in many ways, this is what we're seeing, a order that emerges out of the chaos by assembling those reeds and kind of making it into something that could act as a supporting structure. So very, very important. You know, they were also credited with the hypostyle hall. So what that means is they take the columns and then they create essentially a forest of columns. So you can see 1, 2, 3, probably goes far into the spatial composition. There's another one there. This could be the hall in the middle. But the hypostyle hall really is a forest of columns. So incredibly important, you know, going back to the reed, and then, of course, that's one single column. And then you create just a entire hallway of columns. It's going to feel like a forest, or it's going to feel like a forest of reeds. So I wanted to point that out, and the column is incredibly important. You know, they're credited with the hypostyle hall, the column, hierarchical scale, different registers within the spatial composition. Of course, you see what could be registers here, whether separated horizontally. All of those are very important for ancient Egypt, and there's just so many different things. You know, if we can't directly credit to them inventing it, at the very least, we can credit with their scaling inventive uses of them. You know, if another civilization such as Assyria kind of created the column, then they could take that and bring that into their own culture and build on top of that. Hopefully I got that time period right. But regardless of that, you do see how they take that and then they create it on a whole different level to just really innovate and to build and evolve onto the contributions of other cultures as well. And we have done that with the Egyptians as well. You know, neoclassical architecture, for example, if you've ever seen Washington, D.C., you really see the inspiration from, say, the Greeks and the Romans, who then took their inspiration from the Egypt. So really deep root, and it's always important to kind of point that out. And so with this in mind, we talked about nature as chaos. So nature or wilderness, it is the unpredictable, it is the untamed, it is the wilderness. You know, it is an archaic symbol of chaos. So with that in mind, we also see rivers, ponds, oceans as a symbol of chaos as well, because you have the water, it's unpredictable, it is fluid, it could flood. There's so many different aspects of that. And I want you guys to see, there's actually a crocodile creeping under the surface of this water here. And that is very common. Of course, the Nile River had those deadly crocodiles for the Egyptians. They surely saw those for sure. And so what I want you guys to see here, of course, we have that symbol of kind of chaos or natural chaos, but we have a crocodile lurking right under the surface of chaos there. So just think about what that could mean. You know, there's a lot of different metaphors you could draw from that. But with that in mind, we're also going to talk about the idea of order in juxtaposition to chaos. So whenever we're looking at this water, you know, we would expect a boat or a raft or some type of balanced raft to be able to sail across this kind of chaotic surface, but we don't see that here. We see, you know, all around here, the paint and the pigment is kind of peeling and fading away. This is a kind of post-civilization scene that we're looking at here. So we certainly see that for sure, whether it's the coming to reclaim what was once civilization and order, kind of that chaos returning, or it's the crocodile lurking right beneath the depths. So whenever you look at that crocodile, I want you guys to think of the idea of conflict. Of course, if you want to say reach some type of major goal, you're going to have to face some conflict. You're going to have to face some crocodiles. So sailing, say, through the ocean, you're going to go across some predators, and you're going to have to go through those. So that really is a metaphor to conflict and the challenging times in life that I want you guys to really remember. So we certainly see that for sure, whether it's the chaos of the natural world kind of reclaiming what has decayed right in front of us, all very important. And so with that in mind, there is just such a rich history within the work at hand, whether it's ancient Egypt, whether it's the influences which Egypt had brought onto us. So much you could talk about here, and I really hope you guys enjoyed today. This is an AI generated piece, so it was created in an AI program. Not 100% sure. If I did have to guess, I would say Midjourney, but I'm not certain on that, so don't quote me on it. But with this in mind, this is a mixed media piece. So we took this in AI, or the original artist, Oknice, took this in AI and then created something on top of it. I believe it was a digital illustration kind of mixed media piece here. So an AI and then some own edits by hand on a screen there with that digital illustration really creates such a stunning work before us. So it's a blessing to be able to study this, to kind of look back on ancient Egypt, to look at the symbolism and such a rich history that we're given from that culture. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did enjoy this episode, go check out the original artist. It's going to be Oknice Art, doing some really great stuff, and I always love looking at those pieces. So hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. My name is Apollo. This was Apollo Art Analysis, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to support our work directly, please check out our Apollo community tokens. Apollo Art Exchange is an ecosystem of art appreciation which elevates artists each and every day. Thanks for listening.